Welcome my dear students. I welcome all of you to the next video on disaster management. I am Seema Kharbanda, Associate Professor at APJ Institute of Technology, School of Architecture and Planning, Greater Noida. In this video, I'll be dealing with the forecasting systems for the disaster management since we know that they play an important role, and also the early warning and the communication systems which are required both during pre and post disaster stage. Another topic which we'll be discussing in this video is the management which is required pre and post the disaster event. So in brief, we'll be discussing about the forecasting, the early warning and the communication systems both pre and post disaster as well as their importance. Now, before a disaster strikes, what is very important for us? The importance is how to forecast the disasters, because forecasting information may come in many forms. This may be in the form of raw data or they may be in the form of qualitative statements such as bulletins from the National Meteorological Services. Now the timely action in case of a disaster can be enhanced. The effectiveness can be enhanced through accurate forecasts and if we have prompt warning systems. This is the importance and the significance of forecast and warning of the disasters. But still there is a drawback over here, since it's not possible to forecast all the disaster events. So only such events which have an inherent predictability like cyclones, heavy rains, only such events can be forecasted. So this is a drawback which we still have. Some events such as earthquakes may be mildly predictable, but some events may not be at all predictable, like landslides. We cannot predict them, but still we can take some steps to mitigate them. Now looking here, like we see that the prediction of weather in the tropical regions like India is a major challenge because we have a very dynamic nature weather systems. There is a lot of change in the weather elements, such as we have changes in the rainfall, the temperature, wind speed, humidity, and these are the basic meteorological parameters which need to be monitored, and that too on a continuous basis. So we have to search for technology by which we can monitor all these elements. The meteorological satellites provide us a very good measurement of the weather parameters and at frequent intervals. The satellite images on various aspects such as cloud cover and other parameters such as winds, rainfall, sea surface temperature. These are the integral part of the weather forecasting. As we often see during the news, we come to know that a depression area is being formed at such place. This is the clouds which are being formed. So this gives us an information of the it's a forecast about the weather which is predictable. Now for forecasting all this, we need various satellites which provide us with direct images, and so they are very helpful for the forecast of the weather. So I'll be discussing a few, just an introduction of the various satellites which are commonly in use. In India, which we are using is INSAT, which is the Indian National Satellite System. It is a series of multi-purpose geostationary satellites, and these have been launched by ISRO. It was commissioned in 1983, and INSAT is the largest domestic communication system which is based in the Indo-Pacific region. It is a joint venture by the Department of Space, Department of Telecommunications, Indian Meteorological Department, All India Radio and Doordarshan. Next we have the Inmarsat. Inmarsat is the International Maritime Satellite Organization, It is a non-profit intergovernment organization which was established in 1979 at the behest of the International Maritime Organization, which is a United Nations maritime body. This was amended to include the improvements to the aeronautical communications and notably for the public safety. Next we have the Landsat. The Landsat program is a series of Earth observing satellite missions, and it is jointly managed by NASA and the US Geological Survey. Next we have the IRS, which is the Indian Remote Sensing Satellite. The IRS system is the largest constellation of remote sensing satellites for the civilian use, and it has around 11 operating satellites. The Spot satellites are operated by the French Space Agency, Centre National d'Etudes Spatiales. This consists of a series of optical remote sensing satellites with the primary mission of obtaining Earth imagery, which is used for land use, agriculture, forestry, geology, cartography, regional planning, water resources, as well as for the GIS applications. We'll be later seeing how the GIS helps a lot during the disaster, different phases of the disaster mitigation and rehabilitation. RadarSat. RadarSat is a Canadian remote sensing Earth observation satellite program, and it is overseen by the Canadian Space Agency, CSA. ENVISAT. ENVISAT is an environmental satellite. But now it is inactive, but it is still in orbit. It was operated by the European Space Agency, ESA. It was launched on 1st March 2002, but after it lost contact with the satellite, the ENVISAT's mission ended on May 2012. GOES. GOES is the Geostationary Operational Environmental Satellite. It is operated by the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and it gives data on the spacecraft and ground-based elements, and it provides a continuous stream of the environmental data. LIDAR. LIDAR uses a new technology. It's light detection and ranging. This is a remote sensing method, and it's used to examine the surface of the Earth. It uses light in the form of pulsed laser to measure the ranges to the Earth. These light pulses combined with other data recorded by the airborne system generate precise three-dimensional information about the shape of the Earth and its surface characteristics. So these are some basic information which we can get by these are the satellites which give us some basic information which help in the weather forecasting. Now we know that weather forecasting is very important. So how can we forecast the different disasters? There are different agencies which are involved in this. The first and foremost will be the cyclone forecasting and the warning network. The cyclone forecasting and warning network is done by the Area Cyclone Warning Centers, which is known as ACWC of the IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, and they generate special warning bulletins and transmit them every hour in the local languages. So there are 252 analog receivers which have been installed in the field. This cyclone warning dissemination system, CWDS, is planned to be replaced by the digital CWDS because of the better system. The information on the cyclone warnings is furnished on a real-time basis to the control room which is set up at IMD, Indian Meteorological Department, Government of India. CDRs, which are the high-power cyclone detection radars, are installed along the coastal belt of India. since these are the areas where we have the maximum probability of the cyclones. And satellite movement and satellite imagery is received from these weather satellites for the movement of the tropical cyclones over the oceanic regions. The Digital Cyclone Warning Systems DCWS is developed by ISRO. It is a DTH based cyclone warning and dissemination system. So these are the systems which are used for the cyclone forecasting. Next, coming to the seismological observation network for the earthquakes. These are made through a network of seismic stations which are operated by the IMD, which is the nodal agency. These stations collect the data over the long period of time. They study the movement, the earth plates movement, and then they do a hazard risk analysis for the mitigation of the earthquakes. Next, we have the drought warning network. This drought warning network is done through the National Agricultural Drought Assessment and Management System, NADAMS, which has been developed by the Department of Space for the Department of Agriculture and Cooperation. They do this through a comparative evaluation of satellite observed green vegetation cover. The green vegetation cover is studied over a specific time period, and then it is correlated with a similar period in the previous years. Based on this, the drought warning system is carried out. Next is the flood forecasting and warning network. This is done by a regulation of multi-purpose reservoirs by the CWC, which is the Central Water Commission. And it covers all the major flood-prone interstate river basins of India. They have a nationwide network of 945 hydrological observation stations which are distributed in various river basins. The IMD has also taken up the expansion of its network of automatic rain gauges to study the amount of rainfall in the different areas. In addition, 12 Doppler weather radars, DWRs, have been installed for continuous monitoring of the evolving extreme weather phenomena. One such Doppler, color Doppler, is also located at the IMD Delhi on its terrace, which studies the different cyclone and the rainfall events. The forecast is disseminated using computer networks and the satellite through internet, email, VSAT of the National Informatics Center, which we'll be discussing later on, which is NIC. Now coming to the tsunami warning networks. The Regional Tsunami Warning Center is RTWC. It has been set up at the Indian National Center for Ocean Transformation Services in KOIS at Hyderabad. This national early warning system for tsunami and storm surges in the Indian Ocean was operational since December 2007. This center receives a real-time seismic data on a 24/7 basis, which is done from a network of 17 broadband seismic stations of IMD, as well as it also gets information based on real-time data from international seismic networks. All work together. Indian as well as international systems work together to prevent any disasters. So the Japan Meteorological Agency, Pacific Tsunami Warning Center PTWC, and Global Seismographic Network GSN, they all have around 200 active stations, and they detect all earthquakes greater than 6 in the Indian Ocean within 8 to 15 minutes of their occurrence. So the Indian Tsunami Warning System operates using a 3-tier system, which is watch, alert and warning, depending on the size and continuity of the waves detected. So the tsunami early warning systems is sent within 5 to 10 minutes based solely on the earthquake information. So the warning system which they use is watch, alert and warning. So coming to this, These are basically the informations, the forecasting which have been in practice now. Since every year, as we see, natural disasters result in enormous loss of life and property. And since, as we have seen in the COVID case, it is seen, we normally say that we are going back by several years. So any natural disaster leads to a setback in the economic and social development by many, many years. Between 1980 and 2005, nearly 7,500 natural disasters struck worldwide. So we can see the enormity of these disasters. It has taken the lives of over 2 million people. And the economic losses have been estimated at over 1.2 trillion US dollars. So just imagine the scale of losses due to disasters, not only in terms of people, but also in terms of economy and the social life. So it is now recognized that disaster prevention, mitigation, preparedness, and response, as we have seen, are the 4 elements along with environmental protection. These are closely interrelated with the sustainable development, and hence, as per UN, the United Nations, all the nations should mainstream them in their development plans. Sustainable development has to be mainstreamed in the development plans and ensure efficient follow-up measures at the levels of district management administration. So in this slide, we are seeing the approach which is being followed by United Nations. The proactive strategy involves both a holistic and continuous process, and prevention, mitigation, and preparedness are very important aspects, and these lead to a fundamental and prompt and effective response system which helps in the reconstruction and rehabilitation, which are parts of our recovery process. So this is the strategy which is being followed by United Nations, and as per United Nations, this should be followed by all the nations for sustainable development and resilience. So, further on, we are going to see the relevance of the GIS, the Geographic Information System, in the disaster management and how it can help in the different stages of the disaster mitigation or response or preparedness or the rehabilitation measures. So here I'm going to let you know about the importance of the GIS. So here let us see the relevance of the GIS for the entire domain of disaster management. In what steps can it help? First of all, the GIS in the planning stage. In the planning stage, it is useful in helping with the forward planning. It provides the framework for the planners and the disaster management, since they can view a spatial data by way of computer-based maps. As earlier also in my earlier lecture, I have told you that the mapping is very important, since the rescue teams or the persons who are controlling the disasters, they do not have any idea about the area in which the disasters have struck. So the mapping of the areas, the spatial data is very, very important, in which GIS plays an important role. For the mitigation, the use of GIS in disaster management can help with the structural as well as non-structural mitigation. Since GIS allows us to spatially represent areas at risk, as well as also gives an information about the level of risk associated with the particular hazard, and which can help as a guide in the decision making process. It will also facilitate the implementation. Implementation is important. Implementation of necessary mechanisms to lessen the impact in case of any potential emergency. With the help of GIS, the disaster managements are in a better position to determine the level of mitigative structures that should be in place given the vulnerability of an area or the population. So here the vulnerability assessment is to be carried out with the help of GIS. In the preparedness phase, the GIS can help with the identification and location of resources and the at-risk areas. So if this all data is available beforehand, this is a very, very important aspect for the disaster response and mitigation. It establishes a link between the partners and the critical agencies, which allow the disaster managers to know where the relevant partner agencies are stationed. The GIS maps can provide the information on the human resources which are present in any emergency operation centers, which are known as EOCs, as well as the ground personnel such as the security, health providers and other key responders. So because when the disaster will strike, in that case, during that phase, if we know where the support teams are located, you can reach out to the community in a better way. This is particularly useful since the technology can help with the strategic placement of the emergency personnel where it matters most. Where you have the maximum extent of damage, over there you need the emergency personnel. So GIS can help with that. GIS also helps to answer the question as who is to be based where and at what phase during the emergency. It can also help to determine whether or not the road infrastructure and communication networks are capable of handling the effects of disaster, and if necessary also guide in the placement of resources. So these are all the points where the GIS is a boon. Let's say it's a boon for the disaster management. Coming further to the stage of response, GIS technology can provide the user with accurate information on the exact location of an emergency situation. This would provide useful as less time is spent trying to determine where the trouble areas are. As soon as a disaster strikes, we have to reach the help has to reach that place. So the less the time involved, the better chances of recovery and rehabilitation. So as you know, the community are the first responders because they are the persons who are there on the site, but still external help is required. So the sooner the external help reaches a site of disaster, the better it is. GIS technology can also help to provide a quick response to an affected area. Once the issues such as the routes to that area, the road network are known. So it can, so we see that the GIS is very important to know to reach a place. GIS can also be used as a floor guide for emergency response to point out the evacuation routes, assembly points and other evacuation matters. These are for the response during a disaster. Now coming to the recovery phase, how can GIS help? The mapping and geospatial data will provide a comprehensive display on the level of damage or the disruption that was sustained as a result of the emergency. GIS can also provide a synopsis of what has been damaged, where, the number of persons or institutions that were affected. So this kind of information and feedback is very much necessary for the recovery process. Now coming further to the application of GIS, we can see that the GIS can be used to create the hazard inventory maps. After the hazard strikes, so at this level the GIS can be used for the pre-feasibility study of the development projects at intermunicipal level or at the district level. Or it can also be used to locate the critical facilities. It can provide information on the physical location of shelters, drains and other physical facilities. It is also intended for the planners in the early phase of regional development projects or the large engineering projects. So this is the phase of reconstruction or the preparedness phase. It can be used to investigate where the hazards can be a constraint on the development of rural, urban or the infrastructure projects. And during the preparation phase, taking the example of the floods, during the preparation phase, the historical satellite data acquired during the floods, using it is possible to provide the chronologically flood-prone areas in the form of map. So which can show the severely affected or the occasionally affected areas. This will help in the land use planning, and accordingly the regional maps, the regional plans for any areas can be prepared by the planners beforehand. So using this prior information on the probable flood affected areas, hydrological models can be provided and evacuation plans can be generated for carrying out the rescue operations during the floods. So during the floods, a flood map is prepared which shows the spatial extent, the areas which are affected by the floods. And we can also get an idea about the flood damage statistics like district-wise flood affected areas, the submerged crops, the marooned villages, and the lengths of the submerged roads or the railway network can also be provided by the help of GIS. So here what we are seeing is the importance of GIS, how it is helping us in all the phases before the disaster, during the planning stage, during the preparation stage, during the rescue stage, as well as during the rehabilitation and reconstruction stages. The satellite data which can be used at regular intervals for the updation of the flood conditions on the ground in terms of flood progression, the recidence and the persistence of the floods on the ground. This gives the data of on the ground data is available to us. And now coming to the mitigation phase, the GIS is also helpful. So how? Like using the high resolution satellite data, the mapping of the river configuration, the flood control works, the changes in river configuration after the disaster, the studies on the bank erosion, the deposition can be carried out with the help of GIS. It also demarcates the drainage congestion areas in the chronic flood prone areas. So if cleaning or the decongestion is done timely before the initiation of the rainy season, so that can also help, maybe like in the case of urban flooding which we see in various areas in Chennai as well as in Mumbai. If the congestion areas can be known beforehand, then some steps can be carried out to reduce the floods during the rainy season. The flood hazard and the risk zone maps can be generated by using multi-year satellite data acquired during floods, which will also help in the planning of the different regions. So here we see a small tabular format of the importance of GIS. Like in the flood preparation stage, which is before the floods, the required information which is available can be the flood prone areas, and the prior information on the probable flood affected areas. The optimum evacuation plans can be worked out by locating the areas which are less susceptible to the floods. During the relief and rescue operations during the floods, the information which we receive at the flood affected areas, it also gives information on the flood damage, and it continuously gives us an updation of the flood condition, whether the flood is receding or some areas which are free from the floods where we can have the evacuation done. So such data is also helpful. And after floods, during the flood mitigation, with the help of GIS, we can collect the information on the changes in the river course which happens many times after floods, the status of the flood control works, the erosion along the river bank which may have occurred, the drainage congestions and the flood risk zones. So in all these we have seen that how GIS is a very important tool for the disaster management in the disaster management cycle. So here in this slide, what we are showing is the disaster management which is being done by NDRF. NDRF, as we all know, is the National Disaster Rapid Force. They have 11 battalions in India which are located at strategic points in such a manner, depending upon the risk of the disasters, and where they can and they're located in such an areas where they can reach the entire Indian area within like maximum of 24 hours. So in the preparation done by the NDRF, they have selected a team which undergoes the training, the protection kits are available to them, and then the transportation arrangements are done for the preparation based on the type of the disaster. In the activation and mobilization, the first thing which they need is the information on disaster. So as we saw in the case of the help from GIS, they need information on the magnitude, the area, the number of people affected, the number of buildings affected, the weather, and the access routes. So this information on the disaster helps them in preparing and taking along equipment which will be helpful to the people in that area, and the packing and loading of equipment also helps. So, and then a briefing of the team members is done on the current situation. This is the way in which NDRF prepares in the event of any disaster. So here I'll be just sharing some photographs, some relief measures which were undertaken by NDRF during various disasters in our country. So this is an example of the assessment, search and rescue level, which is known as the ASR level. As you see here, the NDRF team first of all needs an area assessment so that they can know the road networks, the house, the buildings, the type of density of population which will help them in carrying out their rescue operations. So the work area assessment is very important, which can be done which can be done by the GIS system. So this is a very important, the mapping of the area is a very important part for the NDRF, and with this help the rescue operations can be done quite effectively. So this is some photographs of the Kedarnath flood rescue which were provided by NDRF. The operation base camp is established at Gupt Kashi. Then the rescue operations are carried out by the NDRF personnel through helicopters. So since they knew where they could land their helipads, they can create the helipads and rescue the people. This information also helps them a lot. But the problem which they faced during the Kedarnath floods, as informed by them, was that they did not have, the Uttarakhand government did not have any idea about the number of tourists which were there at Kedarnath when the incident occurred, when the disaster occurred. There was no information on the total number of tourists, the total number of pilgrims. So till date, no one knows as to how many actually died during that rescue operations after the disaster, since the number of bodies which were recovered would not be a correct measurement of the casualties which actually occurred. These photographs show the Kashmir flood rescue by the NDRF personnel. Since they had an idea about the disaster, but they did not have proper maps also in the case of the Kashmir floods. Proper mapping was not available to them. For that also they faced many problems, like their boats often got stuck by wires, the telecommunication wires or the barbed fencing, and they were deflated. So this was one problem which was being faced by the NDRF during the Kashmir floods, as told by them. Now coming to the next topic, wherein we deal with the importance of the communication in disaster management. As we know that communication is very important. How do we get the information about the in case of a disaster. As we know that there is a breakdown of many networks during the disasters. So this is very important. So every year, as we know that there is a uh, every year there are various hazards which are occurring, various disasters strike India as well as other countries throughout the world. So early warning systems and proper communication is very important. So the aim of the early warning systems is to enable the individuals as well as the communities which are threatened by hazards to act effectively and in sufficient time so as to reduce the likelihood of death or injury or the damage to the property and the environment. The early warning systems vary greatly in the size, structure, the management, because this will depend upon the extent of the coverage, the nature of the hazard, the type of resources which are available, which may be in the form of the human resources or the material resources. Now, communication during the disaster as well as immediately after the disaster situation is a very important component of the response and recovery management because it connects the affected people, the families and the communities with the first responders, the support systems as well as the other family members which may be there where the disaster has occurred or the family members in the safer areas. Communication ultimately determines how effective the response was during the disaster. Even if we have good plans for rescue and rehabilitation, but if we cannot communicate them effectively to the affected people, the plans won't be carried out. So the management of any disaster or the emergency event is a very complicated process and it is a multifaceted task. There are various organizations which need to work together for proper redressal. One of the most important and many a times which is overlooked part of any highly efficient disaster response is the effective information exchange between the information sources, the emergency managers, and those which are impacted by the disaster or the emergency event. So this information exchange is very important. So that is why the proper functioning of the communication system during the disaster management is very, very important, which often gets disturbed due to cyclones or due to floods. So here we see the importance of the communication system in the later slides. Now, first of all, let us see what are the communication modes which are available for the disaster forecasting as well as warning. So, first of all, we have the radio and television. Or we may have the telephone which is fixed and mobile. We should not forget the telephone because this is a very, very important resource for the last mile connectivity. Then you have the SMS, the short message service, which remains effective even when direct communication gets hampered. We have the cell broadcasting. Then you may have the internet and the email service. Email service is also a very good mode of communication. Then we have the intranet, we have the amateur radios, the ham, the community radio or the sirens. These are some of the communication modes which are available for the disaster forecasting and the warning system. For proper communication, the project was taken up by the National Emergency Communication Plan, NECP, Ministry of Home Affairs, the Government of India, in 2004 for the management of law and order, crisis and the disaster situations. It is basically a satellite-based network based on INSAT and Inmarsat, which rests on Polnet, NICNet and VPN as the standby supports. I'll be discussing about these in my later on. The voice-centric and limited data handling capacity system is aimed to provide communication links between the national, state and district emergency operation centers because these have to be coordinating amongst themselves in case of any emergency. And it also provides communication cover to the NDRF battalions which reach the rescue site. And the NDRF battalions have been have been provided with 6 transmittable communication sets, and each comprises of 1 VSAT terminal and 2 Inmarsat type satellite phones which have direct connectivity through the satellite, and these are procured for the search and rescue teams of the NDRF battalion. So the National Emergency Communication Plan, which is organized by the Ministry of Home Affairs, oversees all the rescue operations which are being done, and it is entrusted with the task of providing communication between all the different hierarchies of agencies which are working in case of any disaster. So these show the different networks which are available with the NDRF personnel. They have the satellite phones, they have radio communications, and they have QDA, which is the quick deployment antenna, which can be used in case of some disasters. So these are just a few telecommunication networks which are available with the NDRF. Over here we see the different communications are available with the NDRF personnel. They have the portable radios, they have satellite phones, they have vehicle mounted VHF base stations which is working on the VSAT technology. They have other equipments like laptops, DG sets because of electricity generation, the UPS. So, and the NDRF battalions work as a company, and the team, when the team reaches the rescue station, they set up a base station over there with the help of VHF, which is the very high frequency. Now coming to the communication through the different agencies which work together in case of any disaster. So here we will be studying the different forecasting, the early warning systems based on the Disaster Management Act 2005. This Disaster Management Act spells out the organizational structure which corresponds to the functional responsibilities for the disaster management in India. At the national level, we have the NDMA, which is the National Disaster Management Authority. It is the apex body which is headed by the Prime Minister, who is the chairperson. This NDMA works on the prevention, preparedness, mitigation, rehabilitation, recovery, reconstruction phases of the disaster. It is the highest policy making body for the disaster management, and this is a diagrammatical representation of the National Disaster Management Structure. At the top you have the NRSC, which is with which the NDMA is communicating is the NRSC, which is the National Remote Sensing Center located at Hyderabad. Next you have the NTRO, which is the National Technical Research Organization. Then you have CWC, which is the Central Water Commission for controlling the floods. It is under the PMO. IMD is the Indian Meteorological Department. And then you have the GSI, Geographical Survey of India. And then the NCPs are the National Control Programs, and the CBOs, the community-based organizations. So we see that NDMA is coordinating with all the agencies, and then the SDMA, and the DDMA is also coordinating with the CBOs. And the public interface is being established through TV, the radio, emails, the cellular service, which is the SMS and the voice service, or through remote sirens, through loudspeakers, as well as through lighthouse indicators. So these are the different agencies which work in coordination between themselves during the disaster recovery or the rescue works. So we see the different agencies which are involved together and which help each other. Coming forward, now coming to the disaster management support. The disaster management support is being done by ISRO, and it has established a VSAT based virtual private network, which is known as VPN, under its Disaster Management Service Program, the DMS program. which works on EDUSAT, EduSat satellite in the extended C-band. The DSC, which is the Decision Support Center, has been established at NRSC, the National Remote Sensing Center, Hyderabad. This is a single window solution for the delivery point for the aerial and space enabled inputs, and it uses its data in the management of pre-disaster, during disaster and the post-disaster phases. The DSC, the Decision Support Center, it has the provision to mobilize the aircraft for obtaining aerial data, and it is addressing all the natural disasters such as floods, cyclone, drought, forest fires, earthquakes, landslides. So the flood inundation maps which are prepared with the help of GIS or derived from the space data are made available at real-time basis for planning the rescue and relief operations using the VSAT-based satellite communication network by the DSC. The next we come is to the National Information Center, which is known as NICNET. The infrastructure provided by NICNET is the Nodal Information Technology Organization for Informatics Development and Networking in the government as well as the related organizations. It has undertaken a national program called the Natural Hazards Management Information System in 1990 to support the United Nations Natural Disaster Reduction Decade Program. The NIC district centers are located in the collectorates, so it works at the DM level, and it depends upon the district administration for its logistical support such as the power supply, generator, space. So NICNET has, now this is the agency which is coordinating at the national level, the state level as well as the district level. So this is forming a bridge between the nation at the national level as well as the local district level. Coming down to POLNet, which is a Police Telecommunication Network. This is also a satellite-based specialized wide area network, and it operates on the C-band of INSAT 3E, and it has been set up by the Ministry of Home Affairs. This is an amalgamation of different very small aperture terminals, VSAT technologies, and the digital video broadcast satellite. It provides connectivity for interlinking the various computers at the national level to the state level and the district level computers at the headquarters for the online transaction proceedings. So the Police Telecommunication Network works at the local level as well as at the state and state levels. Now very important is the last mile connectivity which is required, because this is the basic system in which the general public can be informed or they can be helped. So this is a satellite based early warning system, and it is also using the GPS facility. It can work with both way communication since it is based on the GPS facility, and it connects the responders to various aid agencies such as the healthcare, the police department, the fire department, the NGOs which are working in the center, and the pre-disaster communication for the fishermen at the sea area, which is a last mile connectivity is also required. So this provides a satellite based disaster warning system with the GPS facility. Now here we see the National Disaster Communication Network in all. So here, as you see, the topmost organization is the NDMA, which is the National Disaster Management Authority. The NDCN, which is National Disaster Communication Network, is created by the existing communication networks which we have learned earlier, which includes NICNET, SWAN, which is statewide area network, the POLNet, police network, the DMNet by the ISRO, and they are connected to various emergency operation centers, the EOCs, which are established at national level, NEOC, the National Emergency Operation Centers, the state operation centers, SEOC, and the district level by the DEOC, which is the District Emergency Operation Centers. The disaster recovery sites for the National Emergency Operations Centers is located outside Delhi. The basic concept which revolves around this is voice, data and video subcontinental networks using the existing national, state and district level communication infrastructure, and the network is hosted on the optical fiber or microwave terrestrial backbone with the satellite media as its backup, and last mile connectivity is also based on satellite and VHF, very high frequency links. So during the live disasters or any unforeseen contingency which results in the non-availability of the integral network, over there we have we do have the governmental and also public and private networks, which include the ham radio, which also provides the incidental backup support. So here we see that the last mile connectivity may be provided by microcellular or radio, and it is provided for all services like the police, medical, engineering task forces, the fire services, etc. for the corporates, the community, the media and so on. So we have an integration at the national level, at the state level, at the district level through the NDRF as well as through the MCAP and the MEOCs, which are the mobile emergency operation centers. So mobile emergency operation centers are also set up by NDRF at the site of the disasters. Now here we see an integrated basic network which is provided by voice as well as voice data. So the biggest challenge for the establishment of NDCN is that it requires near real-time communication and IT support. A network which is provided, which is in an evolutionary and the phased manner, so that it is in the tune with the National Disaster Management Plan. And a GIS-based data fusion center called the National Disaster Management Information System, NDMIS, has been established at NDMA, and it is connected with the state data centers, the SEOCs and the DEOCs. This is the State Emergency Operation Centers and the District Emergency Operation Centers. So this Merit Community Assistance Pact has been signed, which integrates multiple data sources throughout the world. So here we see that we have a terrestrial links between the NEOC and the NDRF. We have dedicated satellite network with the NDRF, with the NEOC, SDMA, DDMA as well, and the last mile connectivity we have with the disaster site, and where the mobile emergency operation centers are set up by the NDRF teams. So, and here we see the different communication systems which are used by the NDRF battalions. Since each of the NDRF battalions have been provided with vehicle-based communication access platform, MCAP, and these are equipped with communication equipments for effective employment in the disaster situations, which work at the MEOC, which are the mobile emergency operation centers. So the primary mode of communication will be using the satellite system, and the primary objective of all these communication systems is to provide the fail-safe communication through wireless medium at the disaster site for communication amongst the company, the teams and the sub-teams. So we see here that communication system has to be provided at every level. Over here if we see that the battalion headquarters provides satellite connectivity through the Ministry of Home Affairs, the NDMA, through the companies which are there at the disaster site, to the Director General of the NDRF, to the state headquarters as well as to the district headquarters. All is connected through the satellite connectivity, and very high frequency connectivity we have between the companies and the different teams which are working at the disaster sites, which further communicates with the sub teams at a local level within a radius of around 5 to 10 kilometers. So we see the importance of communication in all the different stages. So this was a brief introduction about the different types of forecasting systems, the communication networks, during the relief measures, during the rescue measures, and I hope this will be quite helpful to all of you to determine and to have a great idea about this.